Hello and welcome to Hobson Bros. This week,
We're talking stouts today, for the second time in 2 years.
For an open window on a crappy world. Max and Chris from Ups and Brews. Ups and Brews. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
alright, so this week we're doing stouts. And as Chris was saying, but I cut it off, it's been 2 years since our last video on stouts,
Yeah,
which is nice.
which was a very cool video.
Makes me feel old.
Not that old. You still have the mustache on the video, you have a beard, you wear a suit on the video.
Talking about the mustache, man, like I've had the mustache for a very long time. I don't think I've ever shaved it. Well, I have, but like not in at least 5 years.
Maybe more.
Maybe more.
Yeah, pretty sure it's more. But the reason why we're redoing this video is because it's 2 years old and that 2017 Max and 2017 Chris were, let's say, a bit different and maybe less knowledgeable of the subject, which brings me to the next part. I'm gonna do the history part since Max is now a lot more knowledgeable with brewing techniques around stouts. Am I right?
You're correct.
Correct.
Alright, so Chris, what's the history of stouts? And by the way, it's not Russian Imperial Stouts.
No,
we're not
no.
doing Imperial Stouts. We're not doing those videos. We've done them many times.
Way too many times.
Sometimes without knowing that we were redoing the same thing. Anyway, so yeah, stouts. No regular, normal stouts.
So stouts originated back in the 1600s, 1700s in Britain. We're talking about the guys working in porters, drinking dark, cheaper beers that were called porter. But no worries, we'll get to stouts. It's just that those guys were drinking those darker beers, but also at the same moment, stronger beers, higher quality, let's say, more FT versions of the porters were brewed and sold as stouts. So stouts meant back in the 1700s, strong beer. Am I good so far, Max? I think I'm very good.
Yeah, you're entirely correct. So one of the ways that would actually distinguish the strength of the beer was with X's. So you know how like the cartoony 1X, 2X, 3X's?
Yeah.
With beer was the same concept. So the higher the alcohol, the more X's until you got into Imperials. Stouts, it was just a way to say that it was a strong version of the porter, because yes, porter was one of the most popular beers in Britain for a very long time in those years. Now, at the same time as you saw stouts kind of start appearing,
Yep.
there was also the invention of the thermometer and the hydrometer. So people were starting to be able to calculate how much sugar was going into their beers, which kind of revolutionized the way that brewers would brew. Funny enough, the hydrometer was better accepted than the thermometer. So brewers back then already had their own techniques to figure out how hot the wort was.
Yeah, like putting their hands in it.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the theories behind the rule of thumb is that brewers would put their thumb in the mash, and if they could hold it there for a couple of seconds without it burning or without it being lukewarm, the wort or the mash tun was at the right temperature. So it's kind of weird that it took them so long to go, oh, thermometer is a better technique.
Yeah.
Hydrometer, one of the reasons is the hydrometer offered something new, where now they could calculate how much sugar was in the wort. As a thermometer, they already thought they had the right technique. Anyways,
So
please carry.
just like
carry
Max
on
said,
with porters.
hydrometer made its way.
Hydrometer.
Hydrometer made its way to brewing, at the same time as stouts made their way to Ireland. So, St. James Gate Brewery, who's known for Guinness, started brewing their own stout boasting at 7.5%. We're talking way stronger than the usual 4.2% that we have in Guinness now. And this version of Guinness was really like what kicked off stouts in general. It gave Guinness the opportunity to distribute pretty much everywhere around the world, which they started producing a foreign extra version of this stout that was sold in the Caribbean. And if you talk about stouts in the 1700s, you can easily find them in the Baltics in the form of a Russian imperial stout, which is a video that we already did, but this really kicked off the whole thing.
So two things on that. First off, you're entirely correct. So the way to get from England to Russia was actually to go through the Baltic Sea. So that's why you see a lot of iterations of this beer being copied, like Baltic Porters or Baltic Stouts or whatever, and the Russian Imperial Stout, which was never called that in Russia. It was just a porter. It was a stout porter from England. It's only on the marketing side in England they started calling it the Russian Imperial Stout because the Russian court really enjoyed that beer, so it was a marketing ploy. Another fun fact about that is isinglass. Isinglass is a way to filter your beer. It's a fish bladder, and basically the ships would carry beer up to Russia, and then they would take those fish and bring it back down and then sell it to a bunch of places in Europe as a way to clarify their beer. Now let's go back to Guinness. Guinness no longer uses isinglass, or at least last I checked they weren't, or they're in the process of changing that.
I think it's all from the PETA thing, vegan. I think it's all around that.
I could talk for hours about veganism and brewing and beer, because there's no reason why you should think that your beer is not vegan safe. Not a lot of people use isinglass anymore. It's kind of a thing of the past. It's still interesting to ask the question as well, considering that some people use, oyster stouts, or we've seen crab in stouts and stuff like that.
No.
But usually beer, pretty vegan. Anyways, isinglass not used anymore. Let's go back to Guinness again. Guinness, when they started, they actually signed a contract, a lease for their property for 9,000 years, which was probably more of a way to avoid some sort of tax or some sort of whatever. It doesn't make any sense, 9,000 years. Who signs a lease for that? And the other thing they signed for was access to the water, so to be able to ship out their beer. So that's one of the reasons why Guinness is so big today and was so big back then, because they could export their products very, very easily compared to other breweries in England that were literally in the middle of the island and would have a hard time getting their product outside.
God damn, that's a lot of history for one part. But Max, brewing a stout is kind of like an art form. It's putting forward your malt profile, creating a texture, creating a nice head on top. How does it work in the brewing process when you go out there and make a recipe for a stout?
Well, let's look at the base of the beer. So stouts can be a little challenging, or can seem challenging to brew because of the color. And you would assume that it has only roasted malts because of the flavors you get from it. Especially Guinness, some people say it's very roasty, very coffee, very bitter in that sense, a lot of tannins, which can be true and not true at the same time. And funnily enough, it's still a very small percentage of your grain bill. And actually, stouts, I'd say, are malt heavy. Although you still use hops to very much balance out those malts, that sugar, because you're going to use a lot of it. Let's take Guinness, for example. Actually, let's just take stouts in general, for example. The main percentage of your grain bill is still your Turo or your Pilsner or your Maris Otter. It's still something that has a big diastatic power, which means that starches are going to be easily converted into sugars, because that's how you make beer. The problem with your roasted malts is that they don't have any diastatic power anymore. There's no sugars left. There's no enzymes. They've all been burnt out. So that's why small percentage of your grain bill. And depending on what flavors you want, you're going to go for more of a chocolate or more of a coffee or more of a roast, and you create your own stout with it. So it's not very different. It's just more malts to be added to your recipe. Let's let's go back to Guinness because I am a big fan of Guinness. I am not ashamed to admit it.
Insert Max tattoo of Guinness.
Yeah, exactly. There's somewhere. It really is one of my favorite beers, and not just because of the quality of the product, but also the marketing that went behind it. And just the fact that they can have that creamy of a body and that white head with a black body, it's incredible. All right, anyways,
it's an impressive beer. Like
it's a very impressive beer.
Like it's just part of. I guess it's something that really helped classic mainstream macro beer drinkers transition to the more craft beer state that we have right now. It's still to this day somewhat of a beer very respected from big beer drinkers, small beer drinkers. Like to this day.
Exactly. And to go back to the history part where with the hydrometer, what happened as well is that ales and pale ales were starting to get pushed by the government. They had a tax incentive in the sense that if you brewed a pale ale instead of a porter, you were not taxed on that product. So a lot of breweries switched to pale ales, which is why you don't necessarily see a lot of porter and a lot of stouts everywhere. That's because it's not quite as popular anymore. Pale ales kind of took over in that time. But Guinness stayed a very, very popular beer to this day. So I mean, it's a testament to how awesome that product is. Other fun fact about Guinness, they use. Oh, I lost Chris.
Oh no, I'm still there. I'm still there. Low power mode.
Okay. So, where was I with this?
Speaking of
Guinness.
Yeah.
So yeah, another fun fact about Guinness, instead of using CO2, which is the more common gas you would see in a brewery, they use nitro to have that more creamy mouthfeel. Nitro doesn't like to be in solution, so it tries to get out as fast as possible. That's why when you pour a Guinness, you see that nice bubbles and that
cascading
all the way
effect.
Back up, cascade effect. It's really interesting. Another thing, because they use, well, not necessarily because, but they always intentionally sour some of their wort to add to the bigger batch to try to balance that pH. A couple different reasons, probably because dark grains tend to have a better time at controlling pH. And also calcium and all that, it doesn't mind quite as much. We could do a full episode on pH and calcium.
They knew about that,
because like one of the reasons why they would brew porters in the first place is because anything that was a lighter body would actually not be very good. The dark malts would balance out that hardness in the water by adding more acidity to it. Anyways.
That's a dope fact. A dope fact.
Yeah, it's a lot of facts. A lot of things going through my mind right now. So yeah, they intentionally sour some of their wort. Also because with your carbonation, you get carbonic acid usually. If you don't have any CO2 in your beer, you're not going to have that carbonic acid effect. Therefore, you have to find other ways. Naturally, that's just an evolution of this beer throughout the hundreds of years it's been around, which I believe Guinness is on its 230-something year of lease. Of that place, if not longer.
So they're not even a third into their lease where they are.
Well, it's just crazy. I mean, I think there's just not going to be humans by the time their lease goes up, but that's just
not even a third, like not even 8. Sorry, my maths are very bad.
Yeah. Oh no, it's crazy. So are we there?
Yeah. Let's go with the N word.
All right. So if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe, share the video, and click on the video that just appeared here, or the subscribe right here. I don't know if it's actually going to work. We're trying this.
It's probably going to work. It's probably going to work. But again, also, don't forget to drink a stout on St-Paddy's Day, which is...
Oh, yeah, that's right. Happy St-Paddy's Day.